Hello and welcome to another episode of our Brothers Creed podcast, where we talk about motivation, experiences, and exploring the world around us. We are the Thomas Brothers, and I am Jared.
And I'm Ethan, and today we're going to be talking about the epitome of our podcast, right? The Creed. And we're going to talk about a little bit we're going to talk about some people in history. We're going to talk about their creeds. We're going to talk about some modern day principles that people can live by. Some history as far back as ancient Greece and as far back as the American Revolution. So,
and as soon as modern day.
Yeah, as soon as modern day.
Yeah, the one that I'm going to share, there was an article that came out that was really going around work back when I worked at Goldman Sachs, and they were like, it was called the Unofficial Goldman Sachs Guide to Being a Man. And so there's a lot of funny kind of rules to live by in that. So I wanted to, some are good, some are kind of funny, some are garbage, but I thought it was going to be interesting to read through.
Interesting. Yeah, so we're going to look through some quotes from some of these people, do some character profiles, and learn how we can build our creeds better.
Let's do it.
Spartans! What is your profession?
Any man who must say, I am the king, is no true king.
What I do have are a very particular set of skills. Skills that make me a nightmare.
If I can change, then you can change. Everybody can change!
Let us all unite! Let us fight for a new world, a decent world.
Okay, so the first one here is someone that probably no one has ever heard of. His name is Benjamin Franklin.
Who's that?
He goes by the name Benji.
Old Ben?
Yeah, so Benjamin Franklin was obviously a very influential person in the United States as one of our founding fathers. He was a bit promiscuous, though. He loved them French ladies.
He liked to do things in the nude.
Yeah, he did. But some of the quotes that are from him are very interesting. A lot of them I didn't even know that they were from him. I just thought that's like mantras that people would say.
Yeah,
you know?
He's really smart.
Yeah,
he was very learned, I think.
So maybe he's on something with the nudity.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go walk through some of these quotes, and we can just talk about them in line, and we can just share our thoughts. So the first one is, he says, content makes poor men rich. Discontent makes rich men poor. And I like that because it kind of goes along with something else that I've heard. It's like a rich man is a man with cheap hobbies.
Yeah. Well, I kind of think content in that, and maybe that's kind of like an old way of saying things, right? Because now you think of the word contempt and you're like, oh, it's almost like sounds like a negative word.
Yeah.
At least to me. But I think almost contempt is like maybe gratitude. It's kind of how I was thinking about it. A person with gratitude is never a poor person, but a person without gratitude is always,
Yeah. In fact, there was a quote that kind of went along with this by Neil Walsh that said, "The struggle ends when gratitude begins."
Yeah.
So I like that. And I'm always thinking like, well, if I've always thought about, in retirement, like a rich man is a man who has cheap hobbies. I'm like, what can I do? Like, shooting is definitely not cheap. I'm like, oh shoot,
no.
I've signed up for the wrong hobbies here.
I think it's interesting. It's kind of there's a balance between that too, because you want to be grateful for what you have, but at the same point, you want to be prosperous and you want to progress. Yeah. And it's like, to a certain extent, you kind of like, oh, well, man, where does laziness come in there? Mm-hmm. Is it kind of like, oh, I'm good if I'm 100 pounds overweight, it's not that big a deal. At least I'm not 200 pounds overweight, you know? And it's like, so I'm fine. I'm grateful for my health as it is. It's like, well, yeah, but you could be healthy. You could, feel better. You could whatever else. And so, I mean, maybe that's a lame example, but still, it's like there's a fine line between kind of balancing, okay, being happy with what you have and
striving for better,
striving for more.
Yeah. The next one, he said, an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. I think that's true. better than any investment you can make. Is the best investment you can make is in yourself.
I saw a video on YouTube the other day, and I don't know if it was kind of like Dave Ramsey type. It wasn't him, but it was kind of like a life coach type person, and this person called in and was like, "Hey, I'm 19 years old and I have $2,000 to my name. I'm living with my parents and I don't really have any expenses, and I really want to invest this $2,000. What should I put it in?" And the guy was like, "You."
Yeah.
Put it into you. That is the best investment you'll ever make.
Yeah.
And he was just like, you could put it in the stock market, make 6%. You could try to buy a rental property and make, however much, or even if you made 25, even if you tripled it, it's never going to be the same return on investment as if you put it into yourself.
Exactly. The next one here is well done is better than well said. I think that's good. Just be a person who takes action and not just someone who gives lip service or who just talks about action,
Yeah.
Bring the action.
Yeah.
That's that song, you know what I'm talking about? Where it says bring the action.
Is that Black Eyed Peas?
Yeah. I always felt like that was Barack Obama's voice.
I doubt it.
It always sounded like Barack Obama. Where it says bring the action. I don't know,
we can look it up, but I doubt it.
The next one is a house is not a home until it contains food and fire for the mind as well as the body. So that was good. Your home isn't really a home unless, especially when you think about the context of having kids, unless it provides nourishment to both body and mind. And I would also add in there spiritually as well, because you need to be nourished across all and validated emotionally as well.
Yeah,
I'm just adding on here. But
yeah, well, I think that.
But a good home, you as a parent, you need to foster this environment where your kids are nourished in all of these areas of their lives.
Yeah, well, I think 1700s, that time period, there was, life was a little bit different. In that, it's like when it gets dark outside, then you kind of go to bed. You could sit and read by the fire or whatever else, but nowadays, life is just so much different. We have TV and so many other distractions, and I think that can kind of play into what he's saying there as well. Is that it's almost like a productive home. Not only physically for the things you're doing, but just mentally, and try to make every action you do have some sort of return.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you can't watch TV or whatever else. There's return on relaxation and fun and entertainment too. But
yeah, definitely. There's a couple in here that are. I'm not going to read all of them, but one of the ones I like here is it says. I'm just going to read through a couple real quick. It says, "Honesty is the best policy. You may delay, but time will not." This one I really like. "Never leave that till tomorrow, which you can do today." Picasso also said something similar, which was an adaptation, which said, "Only put off until tomorrow what you are willing to die having left undone."
Oh, I like that.
I like that a lot.
Actually, I don't like that because sometimes I do that.
Well, is it that important to? Is that Excel sheet that you were working on at work? Is it if you died and that was undone? Would that make a big of a difference?
Actually, I kind of like Picasso's better than Benjamin Franklin's because there is some things like I write some things down in my to-do list or whatever, but then it's like, if I didn't get to that, it's like okay, it's not that big deal.
Yeah,
and so, but don't want to push the things that are important.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you don't want to be so overloaded with a to-do list that you miss actual life. It's like that. There's that movie Click, remember? Mm-hmm. Where he is fast. He's fast forwarding so much, and he's just focused on getting to be the CEO of this company. And then he goes back and looks at his life, and he just didn't make time for his family. He ignored everybody because he was just so focused on the task at hand that he totally lost everything he had because he wanted to be the CEO of the company. Yeah. And so he didn't put it off, but the important things that came up, he ignored. So
interesting.
This other one is, by failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail. I didn't know that was Benjamin Franklin. They who can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. That's very timely in our modern era, because everybody's wanting to give up their liberties for safety. Oh, please track every single place that I go. Be able to turn off. They are now putting in cars a kill switch in every single car so that the police can kill your car whenever they want to.
Yeah.
I think it's like every car produced after 2023 or something like that is going to have a kill switch in it. It's like, and then they're saying that this is where we're going with this social credit system that they have in China. It's like, you posted something bad on social media that we don't like. You can no longer access your car. And now that we all have digital currency, you can no longer spend your currency. And also, we've shut your phone down.
That seems like that would be ripe pickings for people to do crazy things. I mean,
to get hacked or something.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying, I mean, if they shut somebody down like that much, people get desperate. And when you get desperate, I mean, you can't pay your bills, you can't get around, you can't use your phone, can't do whatever. I mean, what are people going to do? They're just going to sit in their house and twiddle their thumbs.
Yeah, well,
I don't know. They're going to get desperate. They're going to go rob somebody, or they're going to go.
Yeah. So, I mean, you talk about COVID, and like they're tracking every single place you go on your phone, and like, it's because we're contact tracing, and like
it's for everyone's safety. It's for the safety of the community.
Yeah.
Do it for the children.
There's another one under here that I'll share another one. Well, actually, I jumped to it. Okay. It is the first responsibility of every citizen to question authority. Whenever a politician, and then I think further he said, whenever a politician opens their mouth, ask yourself who profits. So,
got to get the big man. Got to get the big man.
This message is sponsored by Pfizer.
Yeah,
Pfizer vaccine just proved cure every disease you've ever had. So anyway, I think those are very interesting. A couple other ones here are: be at war with your vices, at peace with your neighbors, and let every new year find you a better man. I totally agree with that, and I think that's one part I love about the new year is just like chance to set some goals for the new year and try to work at those goals. And if you know me or at all, then you know that I do actually work on those goals the entire year. I don't just give up mid-February. Either write something worth reading or do something worth writing. A penny saved is a penny earned. I didn't know that was from him. Early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. I did not know that was from either. And those are all the ones that he said. But anyway, I thought there was a lot of gems in there. Some of them I were like, I just thought that was some like old wives' tale or something. But lots of sage wisdom in there from Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah, that's a lot of great quotes. I know that he was pivotal in a lot of what happened in the early days of our country, and was very smart. I think he brokered a lot of kind of treaties and amnesty between what was new United States and other countries. So I also am going to talk about a founding father, and I'm going to do kind of a character profile, let's say, on George Washington. So, first off, George Washington, I'm going to talk a little bit first about his physical characteristics, right? So, George Washington was 6'3", and this is late 1700s.
People were much smaller back then.
So it's interesting because I thought that too. And I looked up what was the average height in the late 1700s, and it was 5'8".
What's the average height today?
Right? And then I was like, oh, that's kind of short, right? And then I looked up the average height in the United States today for men, and it's 5'9". I'm like, oh, that's still kind of short.
What is the average height for Caucasian men?
I don't know. I just looked up average height for men in the United States.
Because different races are different heights.
Yeah,
but like Asians and Latinos are much shorter.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. And so that might be throwing some skewed information, skewed data into the mix. But I would say maybe with white men that are about as George Washington would have been in that time, and the other people in the colonies, or in the United States. Yeah, he was very tall for the time.
Yeah, definitely.
6'3" is tall for today. And
Arnold Schwarzenegger was 6'3", right?
6'2".
6'2", yeah.
Yeah.
So he was as tall and as wide as Arnold Schwarzenegger?
So, yeah.
Maybe not as wide, but definitely as tall.
So he was 6'3" and almost 200 pounds. And he had purportedly a very muscular frame that was hardened by a life of outdoor exercise and physical adversity. So, he worked his farm. He liked that. He liked, farming and working in the fields and obviously he was a soldier for a major portion of his career that saw battle in many different ways. And so he was a very kind of just large presence to be around. And I think that kind of played to some of his victories, both in battle and in war, but also in politics.
Well, hold on. He was 200 pounds, 6'3".
Mm-hmm.
That's not very big.
For the time.
Yeah, but I'm 5'11", and I'm just about 200 pounds myself. And I'm pretty muscular. I'm not super jacked, but
it's not like
just one super jacked.
He's not like freaking King Leonidas running around Spartan kicking people.
He's tall. Yeah. He's several inches taller than he would be. Several inches taller than me, about the same weight. Probably not as muscular. Now again, I don't live in a hardened life, but I do a lot of stuff that he probably is not, lifting and stuff like that. So
that's true.
I would think he's kind of more like a skinnier guy. I would say maybe.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how you're carrying your weight or whatever else, but I don't know. It said those who knew him said he was muscular, so maybe they didn't know what muscles were.
Those
back
are the
then.
short guys.
that was before the barbell. So it's easier to describe. It is easier to describe George Washington than it is to explain George Washington. Because he was a very interesting guy. So, he did a lot to train himself. He did a lot of self-learning. He was a very smart person, but he was admittedly not as smart as some of the other intellects of the day, the Benjamin Franklins and everyone else. He did not have he did not study abroad and have as good of an education as some of these other people did, but he didn't let that slow him down. He studied and read and learned and soaked up as much information as he could. He impressed his colleagues with an even-keeled demeanor and an adherence to strong moral values. Abigail Adams, so I'm guessing that's John Adams' wife, she wrote of him, and this is really kind of a weird quote, but we can break through it. It says, he has a dignity which forbids familiarity mixed with an easy affability which creates love and reverence. So basically, I kind of had to look up a couple of those words, but basically what that means is he was a really nice guy. And his the dignity that he had and just kind of the aura that he gave was one in love and reverence towards other people. So what are some of the attributes that people say George Washington had? So actually, funny story before I get into some of his attributes. So kind of the famous picture that we have of George Washington, right? The one that we have on the money, and he's just kind of sitting there and he's kind of got his lips pressed together, and he's just kind of, interesting photo or interesting picture of him. But according to the guy who was the one that painted the picture of him, they didn't get along very well. And during the 4 days where the guy came and George Washington was sitting as the guy painted him or whatever, they had a couple arguments. And so they said that a lot of his family said that that picture, and the picture that we pull a lot of his other portraits from or whatever, kind of the foundation of what he looked like, actually didn't even look anything like him, and that the artist got what they called artist revenge on him, and put some things in there that really kind of made him look bad, and like how his lips were sitting and how his eyes were, or something like that. His family said didn't really even look like him.
Oh wow,
which I thought was kind of interesting. But some of the attributes that he had, it says, first off, he had strong moral character. We all know the story of George Washington chopping down the cherry tree, and, he told his dad, and he was honest, and he talked about it. Well, that story is made up. That story was made up by a guy who was writing a biography on him, but he made it up because to give an illustration of the honesty and the kind of person that George Washington was, even as a little child. He had a really lofty reputation that was upheld by his actions. So we talk about Benjamin Franklin, almost actions speak louder than words, right? And that's really how he was. One of the things that he did is he actually refused to be paid for commanding the Continental Army. He only required to be reimbursed for expenses. And when he resigned his commission, even though he was extremely popular, he decided to give that power kind of back to the people and back to the government at that time. I think we talked about that one time about how George Washington could have been king, right?
Yeah.
But he said, no, it is, we have built this country around a constitution, and this is how we want it to be. Another attribute that he has was he was easy to talk to. He had a mastery of social interactions that naturally translated into the political arena. So he was just very easy to be around. I think a lot of that came from that he wasn't as learned as some of the other people were, and so he was. It was easier for him to associate or to communicate with people of, let's say, lower class. Not that people are lower class, but just lower social class. He was large in stature and presence. We talked about that.
In fact, there's a legend that he threw a silver dollar across the Potomac, and that's how strong he was.
Yeah,
and so they were like, "Oh man, you threw the whole thing across the river." He was a strong guy, and that kind of added to the legend.
Yeah, the legend of Washington. Another thing I thought was interesting is that they specifically said that he dressed very fashionably. And I kind of want to dig into this one a little bit.
Like Cam Newton?
Yeah, I don't know if it was that fashionable. So he learned to value a very sharp attire. And he actually said this. He said, "Nothing adds more to the appearance of a man than his dress." And I thought that was really interesting. And you kind of think about that today too, and the initial appearance of someone, even if you just say like in the business world or when you're just interacting with people, it is so easy to look at someone and like that first appearance is very telling. Not that you're supposed to judge a book by its cover, but everyone does it. You have this micro judgment right at the beginning, the first couple seconds of meeting someone, just based on their looks. And if you're dressed sharp, and it's kind of like, if you're dressed sharp and everything, you're not sloppy, then you almost command more respect. Lastly, he was very romantic. He loved his wife very much, and he very frequently sent her letters while he was off at war or battle. And one thing that he did is he always ended his letters to her, and he always signed them, "Your entire George Washington." So it's kind of like,
that's
okay.
nice.
Yeah, that's nice. So he was said to have patience, drive, a very good attention to detail, a strong sense of responsibility, a firm moral conscience, and all of these characteristics drew people to him and really are the reasons why they had such confidence and trust in him. And so how does this apply to building a personal creed? I don't know if George Washington had a personal creed written down, but I think some of these attributes that he had and kind of this moral code maybe that he lived by of being, honorable and patient and having a high moral standard, I think that is telling by the way people talk about him. So one of the things, so he got sick. He actually got a really bad throat infection, and that's what he died from. It's kind of like tonsillitis, but like really, really bad, and your throat closes up and pretty bad, pretty nasty. But when he did die, the papers in the area, well, all over the United States at that point, they ran tons of articles on him. And one of those articles in part said this. It was a poem that was written about him. And it said, Americans behold and shed a grateful tear for a man who has gained your freedom most dear, and now is departing unto the realms above, where he may rest in lasting peace and love. And so for something like that to be posted about a person like all over the country, I mean, he must have been very, very respected for them to write poems of his, him gaining your freedom most dear and, resting in peace and love and that all Americans should shed a tear for the loss of this great person. So I just thought that's really kind of telling about him as a person, who he was, and how he lived. And I think really that's the whole basis of what our creed is. What we're trying to do is we're trying to build something, build a lifestyle, a set of beliefs or principles that guide our actions to not impress other people, but I think if done correctly, it will have the potential to influence other people's lives for the better.
Yeah. As you know, I thinking about that. Something I've been thinking about recently is that history is written by the victors, and so you think about the past 3 or 4 presidents, and how polarizing they have been, to where you have one group of people who absolutely hates him, other group of people who like absolutely loves it. You got some people in the middle who are like, man, this guy's got good things and bad things. Right now, our president has the lowest approval rating of almost any president ever. And when we look back, looking back, I hear, well, like, as far as like in recent memory, I hear, well, Carter was he was an okay president, but like the presidents before that, like, I don't know, like they were just good presidents, I guess, And so sometimes a lot of those feelings are lost to history. I'm not saying that George Washington was a bad guy, but some people may not like you, especially in politics. I mean, how many corrupt politicians have come before that died, and then people still, oh, this person was so great, it was so amazing. And it's like, no, that person was terrible. That person was awful. I can think of several senators right now that fall into that camp, and all the media is going to be like, this person was the best person ever. But I'm like, what?
I think a couple things about that. I agree. You don't know the whole story, and I'm sure George Washington and Benjamin Franklin and Jared Thomas, right, have all done things that they probably don't want flashed up in bright lights. And if he heard us talking about this like this, he'd probably be like, yeah, just kind of, I just did my best,
Yeah.
It's like, but I think too is that in our time period right now, I almost feel like it's more about personal gain. And I think that has always been the fact throughout all of history, from, the beginning to now. People are selfish inherently, and it's about personal gain. But I think in the times of especially some of these founding fathers, they had really a mission to make America great, right? And I mean, it was almost like this patriotism was greater than themselves. I don't feel like that exists today. Today, it's more about, how can I control other people and how can I gain and I don't know. I feel like
it's
more,
especially in the politics realm.
That's what I'm saying. Is
Yeah.
in politics, I think it's just a completely different game.
Yeah, it's a total crapshoot. And he was a soldier first, and then he was a politician next. But I think that also, like in our time, if you're going to be friends with everybody, you're going to be not really close with anybody. And I think that especially in our modern time, if you're fighting against, if you're fighting for what's right and what's good, because I think there's a great need to fight against what's wrong in this world, then there will be people that don't like you. But the British didn't like him, at the time. Like, that scoundrel came and killed us on Christmas morning.
I know that he didn't have tons and tons of people he was close with. He had a very, very small internal close-knit group that he was close with.
Yeah. So, I'm sure people thought he was a scoundrel for going and killing people on Christmas morning, like when he crossed the Delaware.
Yeah.
And so, I think that to get up we should be concerned about our character more than our reputation. Our reputation will follow when we have that good character. And it sounds like, George Washington, I do believe that he did have a good character. I think that things can easily get lost to history, especially when it's like, one of the founding members of our country. It's easy to overlook some of the more nuanced things. But like I mentioned with Benjamin Franklin, there's some things that, that he said that were great, but there's also some other stuff that he said that I don't agree with at all. So I was looking up some of the other things, and he, said, I believe in God, but I don't believe in Jesus Christ, and I don't believe in some other things. And I was like, dude, I disagree wholeheartedly. And so, they say there's good things and there's bad things, and everybody's just human. So,
yeah,
very, very good. That's very interesting about him and some of that history. I know you got another one too. Let's talk about your other one from history, and then we'll talk about my.
Yeah, so this one will be shorter, right? So this one's about kind of ancient Greek history / theology. So if you remember the Iliad from Homer, right? Homer wrote the Iliad, right? And it was kind of like a history of ancient Greece, right? Now, some of it's made up here and there or whatever, but I want to talk about Hector, right? Hector was the Prince of Troy, and he was the greatest warrior during the Trojan War. And so just a quick reboot of history. If you've ever seen the movie Troy, it kind of goes through all of this with Eric Bana and Brad Pitt as Achilles. So Paris, who was Hector's little brother, he fell in love with a girl that was named Helen, right? And Helen was already married to King Menelaus, who was the king of Sparta at the time. And it said that Paris had to raid Menelaus' house and steal Helen from him, and she was willing, and she went willingly. So he basically stole her in the night, and they ran off together. And, of course, Menelaus didn't like this, and so he declared war on Troy to get his wife back. And supposedly Helen was, extremely beautiful, and she was Aphrodite's herself.
The story wouldn't work if she was ugly.
Yeah. And so declared war, and then he sought help from his brother Agamemnon, who assembled the entire Greek army to defeat Troy. And so Troy was kind of held up in a stronghold, and then the Greeks and this Menelaus guy and Agamemnon were wanting to attack them and to get Helen back. Well, Paris and actually challenged Menelaus to a one-on-one combat for Helen as a way to avoid war between the people. But Paris was kind of a squirrely guy. He was not very strong. He was kind of known to be a little bit cowardly, and it just wasn't looking good. So they agreed, and they started having this one-on-one duel. Paris was defeated, but before he was killed, and now the story kind of goes a couple different ways, but there was one story goes, before he was struck in with a killing blow, the gods picked him up and took him to like into the city walls or whatever. But in other accounts, and actually in the movie, Hector comes in and saves his little brother and kills the other king. And that kind of throws everything into a massive war because he kind of intervened in this one-on-one duel, which is something that you don't do.
Yeah.
And so Hector was a very strong person. He was a very warrior person, but he was very smart too. But one of the things that he said that I thought was really cool, and this is kind of goes back to the creed and the code, is that he said, all my life I've lived by a code, and this code is simple: honor the gods, love your woman, and defend your country. That's what he said. That was the code that he lived by. Mm-hmm. I kind of like that. That was when I was looking through personal creeds and codes of conduct and mantras from some people. I found that one from Hector, and I was like, man, that's really cool. So, to go on in the story, he ends up accidentally killing one of Achilles' really good friends. It really makes Achilles mad. Achilles comes, and they have a one-on-one duel, and eventually Hector gets killed by Achilles, and his body is dragged around the back of his chariot and all this sort of kind of stuff. And but Hector at the end, his dad, the king, Hector's dad, went to Achilles and like begged him for his son's body so that they could have a burial. And Achilles recognized that he was such a good guy that he gave it back to him. And he said the legend said that Achilles and the king, Hector's dad at that time, they held each other and wept because they'd lost such a great man. Hector was a true hero because of his, number one, he was daringly courageous. And I thought in my life, how am I daringly courageous? Daringly courageous. He was solely devoted to his family and people, and he was selfless to others around him. Those are just some traits that I thought were kind of cool. That devotion, loyalty, selflessness whenever it came to that, I was kind of like, yeah, maybe I can attribute some of those things to my personal creed. Honor the gods, love your woman, and defend your country.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that. That's an interesting story. Wild times, a trial by combat, or let's just fight two guys to stop this war. There was that happened in a video I recently posted on TikTok and Instagram, where King Henry, he challenges the other guy to some French general to a duel, 1-on-1. He says, well, you and I, let's fight 1-on-1, and then we won't have to do this war. And he's like, yeah. And it's actually Robert Pattinson who's the guy. And then
I'd rather my men die than me die.
Yeah, then he goes out, and then he gets totally wiped in battle. Yeah, it's pretty good. So this last piece, there's a lot of these, so I'll just kind of skip through them. But these are kind of funny. There was an article that came out, and it was called the Unofficial Goldman Sachs Guide to Being a Man. And these are just funny things. There's actually a Twitter account that's like, I think it's like Heard in the or GS, like GS elevator or something like that. And it's like things overheard in the Goldman Sachs elevator. And it's just like funny things that people say, and like, because there's kind of like an attitude that goes along with this, like being like a modern man kind of a thing. So I'm just going to scroll through some of these. I'm going to put it over here so Ethan can see some of them. We can kind of just scroll through and pick out some of the ones we think are interesting. I think the first one here says, stop talking about where you went to college. It's like, yeah, after you're out of college for like a year, it's done.
Yeah.
Just let it go.
Well, I think maybe one to add to that too. Stop, and this could be beneficial for some of the younger people. Stop talking about when you got out of college.
Yeah. Or high schools. If stop talking about high school. Yeah.
If you lived your golden days in high school, it's just kind of like, oh geez. I knew a guy. He was over at the house a little while ago. He was kind of a friend from church, and He couldn't stop talking about that. Oh man, when I was a senior in high school, we went to state, and it was just like, oh man, it was like that's all he talked about was whenever he went to state for football in high school. I was like, dude, you're like 65 years old. I was like,
Oh my gosh.
Uncle Rico, man.
I'd throw football over the mountains.
If coach would just put me in.
Yeah, seriously. The next one is here. Always carry cash. Keep some in your front pocket. I think that's actually a good one. Always should keep some cash on you to tip.
Yeah. Or in case of an emergency or something.
Yeah, I usually get some small denominations, like maybe a 5, a 20, and a couple ones. It's a good habit to be in. The front pocket, maybe it looks cooler if you pull it out of your front pocket. The next one is rebel from business casual, burn your khakis, and wear a suit or jeans. It's very
one or the other.
Barney-esque from How I Met Your Mother. Suit up.
Yeah. You will regret your tattoos.
Never date an ex of your friend. Yeah, that's probably sage advice.
Yeah.
Time is too short to do your own laundry. I like this one because I think it just speaks to a principle that's more about just life in general. Like I'm thinking about hiring someone to just mow the lawn this whole season because I just don't have time to spend an hour and a half every single Saturday mowing the lawn. I would rather have that time back to spend with my kids or do something productive, you know?
Yeah.
I just got so much going on. It's just like I can pay someone that's time is less valuable than mine to do that job. And it's not that therapeutic for me. Yeah. Especially when it's like 99 degrees outside.
If you perspire, wear an undershirt.
You don't have to like baseball, but you should understand the concept of what a pitcher's ERA means. Approach life similarly. Yeah. I
have no idea what that means.
I'm failing at that one. But I think it's good. I think the principle is good in that you need to kind of understand generally what is going on. Like, I have no interest in March Madness at all. But generally, I'm like, oh, there was a couple upsets. Did you hear about the one upset where it was like St. Pete's or something like that? And I don't know the teams. But it was like some tiny, tiny school that has a stadium for like 3,500 people. The entire school is like 3,000 people. Beat Kentucky.
Really?
The Kentucky is like the number 1 seed.
Yeah.
And so
interesting.
That was kind of a cool story. So, you know, at least pay attention a little bit what's going on around.
Yeah,
you.
Or just check it every now and then so you can kind of talk shop or whatever.
Yeah.
When in doubt, always kiss the girl. Okay. Tip more than you should. I think that's definitely true.
Yeah.
I think it kind of just shows too. I had a couple experiences with that where I was out with a group of people, and there was, I don't know, 5 or 6 guys and you know, probably the same amount of girls. Nobody was together. We were all just friends. And I left like a generous tip. You know, it wasn't like extravagant, but it was like a, you know, larger than, you know, typically than everyone else did. And not because I was trying to I didn't know what everybody else gave until, you know, afterwards.
Yeah.
And the girls that were there were just like, oh man, Ethan, you know, that's like the best thing you could do is not freaking cheap out on the tip and everything else. And I was just like, oh, whew, cool.
Thank goodness I didn't have anything smaller than a 5.
Yeah. Keep the change.
You'll probably use your cell phone too often and at the wrong moments.
That's
I think
definitely
this is
true.
More true today than it was several years ago when this was written. Buy expensive sunglasses. Superficial, yes, but so are the women judging you, and it tells these women you appreciate nice things and responsible enough not to lose them. I can appreciate a good pair of sunglasses, but I don't know if I could justify spending like hundreds of dollars on a pair of sunglasses. Do 50 push-ups, sit-ups, and dips before your shower each morning. That's a good one.
I like this one. Act like you've been there before. It doesn't matter if it's the end zone at the Super Bowl or on a private plane. I kind of like that.
Yeah.
It's just like, you know, hey, act like you scored a goal before.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we do this all the time. It's fine.
Yeah. Learn how to fly fish. I actually always wanted to know how to do that, and I never got the chance when I was living in Utah.
I'm pretty decent at regular fishing, but fly fishing, never tried.
No selfies. Aspire to experience photo-worthy moments in the company of a beautiful woman. I agree with that. Own a handcrafted shotgun. It's a beautiful thing.
I'm just going to go as far as say own a shotgun.
Yeah, period. You should at least one, yes. Let's see. This one says, don't split the check.
Be spontaneous.
Pretty women who are unaccompanied want to talk to them. Want you to talk to them. That's a good one. Oh, I like this one. Cobblers will save your shoes. So will shoe trees. Those are the wooden things.
Yeah,
they
kind of
to keep the form.
Piercings are liabilities in fights. That's funny.
Be spontaneous. Find a Times New Roman in the streets and a Windings in the sheets. She exists. That's funny. Do not use an electric razor. Desserts are for women. Order one and pretend you don't mind that she's eating yours.
That's right. Order for yourself. Yeah. One girlfriend at a time is probably enough.
Buy a tuxedo before you're 30. Stay that size. That's interesting. Hashtag stop with the hashtags. We can't do that one because it helps our reach on our social media. Take more pictures with the camera. Place dropping is worse than name dropping. I liked that one. Yes, of course, you have to buy her dinner. Duh.
Staying angry is a waste of energy. It's definitely true.
Revenge can be a good way of getting over anger, except for that kind of contradicts the prior one. Also, what do we talk about revenge? If you are seeking revenge, you might as well dig two graves, one for you and the person you're after.
Yeah. It's like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies.
Yep. Avoid the last whiskey. You probably had enough.
If it's got velvet ropes and lines, walk away unless you know someone. That's true.
If you believe in evolution, you should know something about how it works. No one cares if you're offended, so stop it. I like that one. Or it was Ben Shapiro says, no one cares about your feelings. Or what does it say? Let's see. There's a lot of these. Some of them are just hilarious. I thought eating alone can be magnificent. Find a place where you can sit at a bar. I've eaten alone several times. When I've gone on like work trips, I just go to a restaurant, sit down, eat by myself. It's actually kind of nice. Ignore the booze. They usually come from the cheap seats. Don't ever say it is what it is. Don't gamble if losing $100 is going to piss you off. Remember, rules are for the obedient. Rules are for the obedience of fools and the guidance of wise men.
Well, there's some
I like that.
Some quick tips and tricks for
I like that last one. The guidance of rules are for the obedience of fools and the guidance of wise men. I think that there's two ways to kind of view rules or commandments, or if you're talking about like a scriptural doctrinal sense. One is a very lazy way, which is the foolish way, that just say, oh, I'm just being obedient to what I'm being told. But for those who are actually actively, you could say the wise men who are actually being active in an intentional way that they act, those rules act as a guidance for them along that path. Even though you may come to the same conclusion, I think that the approach is very different.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, those are the quotes we have, and hopefully you guys have been edified with some modern and historic creeds. Hopefully something in there jumped at you, and you're like, hey, I actually like that. That's something I want to add to my own creed. Maybe put it on your vision board or write it on somewhere in your journal, and keep that in mind as you start to build your own personal creed, so that when someone asks you, hey, what do you stand for, or like, what do you like, or what are you about, you can tell them some things.
Yeah, I think a good a tactic or strategy maybe to building your own personal creed is as you continue to study and read and learn and everything else, just have a running list and say, even just on your phone, and say, oh, I like that quote, or I like that saying, or I like that episode of Brothers Creed podcast. All right, I like this and this and this. Write it down, and then maybe once a month or once a quarter, you kind of pull up everything that you wrote down, and maybe put a little mission statement together, a little creed statement, a little personal guideline for yourself.
That's right. So, well, thank you all for listening to the episode. If you haven't shared our podcast with someone that you know, please share our podcast. It helps, if you like what we're talking about, if you've listened to us a couple of times and if you've subscribed, please let your friends know. We would love to hear from more people, and we'd love to see our reach expand even further. So appreciate you. Follow us on the social medias to see more of. We love to post TikToks and videos, and I post a custom graphic for each
on Instagram.
On Instagram, actually it's the graphic for the episode itself. So, but I think it's updated on most platforms except for Apple. I don't think it actually pushes over to Apple.
Yeah. So, yeah, we appreciate everybody listening. Leave a comment, tell us what you like, and we'll build that creed together.
Let's do it.